need to hear this. This person wrote, "Thank you," is the title. I want to thank you for giving that sermon on atheism and agnosticism. I was very excited to hear a pastor give a message dealing directly with that subject. I went deep into all of the new atheist movement for several years recently, and have just started coming back to God in the last couple of months. I'm having a hard time being fully in again. I'm feeling held back. I have mixed emotions and this thing with faith and so forth, and so they're asking for more help. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because, guys, I want us through the sermon, because it's going to get deep. I don't want us to shut down and stop loving God with our minds. Can we commit to that right now? That about 30 minutes from now, when we're still going and we're really deep, you don't say, it's so deep, I'm just going to think about what football games are today. Can we commit not to do that right now? And instead, think about our atheist and our agnostic friends. Raise your hand if you have any in your life. Any family? Okay. So think of them when you're starting to think about checking out mentally. Okay? And say, no, I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to get what I can. I'm not going to get it all, but I'm going to take notes and I'm going to keep learning, because this is the stuff that so many people need to hear. And so with all that said, we're going to continue on. Here's my final prayer and goal for brothers and sisters is this, is that also your faith, your confidence in Christianity will explode 100 times, just like mine did when I learned these things too. That's my hope and my prayer for you. And so can we pray before we head in? Okay? Let's do that. Jesus, we are just coming before you, and we are asking that you would help us to love you with our minds today. That, Lord, we would pay attention, we will take notes. It's not about me, it's about the stuff that we're about to say. It comes ultimately from you. Lord, help us to learn these things so we can share them with those that we love, to help them. As we commit to you in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. All right, so let's dive in. Here we go. We need some working definitions. So the idea of atheism, A means no, theism means God. It's the belief that there is no God. Okay, pretty simple. Not rocket science on that one. How about agnosticism? This one's a little bit less known. It is A, no, Gnosticism, knowledge. It is to be uncertain if there is a God or not. And so agnosticism basically is this idea there could be a God and there could not be a God, trying to, kind of ride this fence in the middle. Okay? So there's agnosticism. Now, some of the other facts about these two worldviews. In America, these two together are the fastest growing worldviews of any worldview that we have among those who change their mind later in life. Okay, I'm not talking about if you're born in a Christian family and now you're a Christian, you're born into a Muslim family, now you're a Muslim. I'm saying that people change their mind more times than not. They're not going from one religion to another religion. They're going from a religion of a God to one of these, typically. Okay? In fact, in the United States, in the last 10 years, atheism alone has doubled in the last 10 years. Okay? And as I asked for hands earlier, everybody seems to know someone at least, if not multiple people, who hold to these beliefs. Another thing about agnosticism, how does it relate with atheism? Well, usually someone starts as a theist, but they don't go straight to atheism overnight. They just say, okay, there's just not a God. I'm stopping to believe that. Usually, there's this pit stop called agnosticism. It's like, okay, maybe there's not a God, maybe there is, maybe atheism is true, maybe theism, and so it's like a spiritual journey. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to address atheism, but even for agnostics, here's what I want you to do is you consider this is a possibility and that's a possibility, that you will listen to this possibility, and again, my hope and prayer is you will understand this is not a good possibility, okay? And that you will stop actually being agnostic and at least become a theist back again, or for the first time, and of course come to Jesus Christ himself, ultimately, okay? So, now here's something you'll hear from atheists and agnostics often. They will say to a Christian, you need to prove to me with evidence, with reason, that God exists. And I'm a reasonable person, right? And if you give me reasons, I'll change my mind. I'll start believing in God. You guys ever heard that said to you before? Or heard that said out there? Okay? And now here's something that Christians, agnostics, atheists, we all agree on. We all agree that someone can't just say they believe something and therefore it's true just because they believe it. Okay? So, if someone says to me, they come and say, hey, Ryan, I believe in the Easter Bunny. I'll be like, okay, cool. Have you seen the Easter Bunny? Nope. But I believe in him and therefore he's true. Right? I say, okay, well, let me know when you find some evidence maybe or something like that. You see, just because we say we believe something doesn't make it true. We need good reason for it. So with all that said, here's what we're going to do a little bit of time. We are going to answer the atheists and the agnostics' request and demand sometimes for the proof or the reasons or the evidence for the existence of God. And we're going to do so approaching it like, if you will, a structure of the evidence of the reason for God's existence. And the first one that I'm going to give, and let me just say this is not exhaustive at all, which means this is not all there is. You understand? If I gave you all there was, one, I don't know all there is, but two, if I gave you everything I knew, we'd be here a really long time. Like, you don't want that. Okay, it's already going to be a long enough sermon, but let me just scrape the surface. We're going to do the roof, okay? And the reason I'm going to call it the roof, put it the roof, is because this is, if it is true, it is the clearest reason and evidence for the existence of God. Are you ready for it? It is special revelation. That the God that exists has specially revealed to human beings that He does exist in written form that we call the Bible. Think about that. Would that not be the clearest evidence, if it's true, that God exists and He actually told us that He exists in a written form? Right? So, the Bible claims in itself in multiple places that God is the one who wrote it, therefore God is the one that exists. And here's just one of many verses. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16. All Scripture, that's the Bible, is inspired by who? LBLCFC? God. There you go, God, right? Not Moses, not Paul, not, you see, ultimately, by God is the one who wrote this book of the Bible through human authors, using them like a pen in His hand. Okay? So the Bible claims that God not just exists, but He wrote the Bible, and that in that book, He's saying, I exist, among obviously many other things. So it would be like if you went to an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. You're walking around and you happen to find a book. You pick up the book, you're reading through it multiple places. You see that it's talking about somebody named A.O., and then that this A.O. actually, wrote the book. Well, it's a pretty simple, conclusion. There must be an A.O. that exists, and A.O. wrote this book that I just found. Unless we have other reason to doubt that, it's a pretty simple evidence about this person named A.O. See, the same thing is, if it's true there's a God, and He wrote this book, He's telling us in a book that He exists. That's as clear as it gets. And so, do we believe in God's existence because He has said so in the Bible? I know many of you, obviously brothers and sisters, Christians, we believe that. Maybe you don't. Here's what I'd like to encourage and challenge you in this. If you don't, if you're not convinced the Bible is from God and it's proof of His existence, I'm going to ask you this. Would you objectively and humbly pick up the Bible and start reading? And as you do, say, God, if you exist, would you please make it clear to me as I read this? Okay? Because the Bible also says if you seek Him, you will find Him. But the key is we got to go to it humbly and objectively. And so that's my encouragement for you. All right, so that's the clearest evidence. Well, let's go on, because maybe you're not convinced you have the existence of God. So let me give you another evidence. Now we're going to get to the house. We're going to get to the walls of this argument for the existence of God. And we're going to bring in what we call intelligent design. Maybe you guys have heard of that before. Intelligent design. What is that? That's this idea that when you look at the things of nature, and you see how they function and how complex some of these things are that we see out there, that we have to sit there and go, there's no way that the macroevolution, materialistic worldview, that stuff just banged around and happened by chance the way that we see it now. There's no way it's functioning like that. That there had to be a mind behind a design that we see. Therefore, let me introduce to you that mind, His name is God. You see? And so I can give you 1,000,000 different examples within intelligent design showing that God exists, but I'm just going to hit one today, and that is the idea of this thing that we call DNA. DNA is within every living organism, is what we have found in science. It is a physical thing, and it's information. All right? The information is kind of like the DNA is like the book of life for every living organization. And in that DNA, it tells every organism what they're going to be, what they're going to look like. Are they going to have feathers? Are they going to have fingers? If they're going to have fingers, how many fingers? Are they going to have eyes? Are they going to be a fish? Are they going to be a human? Are they going to have different skin color, different hair color, different fur? You see what I'm saying? Everything about an organism is in the DNA of those organisms. Now, here's some facts about DNA. One, it is extremely complex. It's not a simple thing, okay? In fact, Bill Gates, maybe you've heard of him before. Bill says this in the book, The Road Ahead. He says DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. When Bill Gates says something's more complicated than any software, that says something, all right? And so Bill Gates is like, DNA is crazy how complex it is. Second, DNA is very long. It's not some short little book. It is a long deal with a lot of it in every organism. Let me try to bring that into perspective, how long, how much DNA we have in ourselves. You know, if you were to be able to travel from Earth to the sun without burning up, of course, it would be about 93 million miles to get there. Okay? Now, to help us to understand the perspective how far that is, if you got in an airplane and you flew west out of Jacksonville and you went around the circumference of the whole Earth and came back around from the other side, because our Earth is not flat, okay? It is a sphere, and you come back the other way, it's about 25,000 miles. 25,000 miles all the way around, 93 million miles to get to the sun. Okay, does that help us to kind of picture a little bit of our little brains here? You know, we have such finite brains, how far that is. Now, get this. DNA. One human being's DNA. If you uncoiled and uncoiled it and you put it end to end, you would be able to go all the way to the sun and back. And I'm about to give you the most conservative numbers. There's a lot of debate on the internet when you read this, okay? I'm going to give you the most conservative number. You can go to the sun and back 60 times. One human being's DNA, that's how long it is. Within your body, you have 55.5 billion miles of DNA in your body and mine. Right? All right? So it is very complex. It is very long. What else about DNA? Well, DNA, and information for that matter, never creates new information. Scientists have never found DNA making new DNA, like a new kind of DNA. They see mutations, they see copies and pastes, but they don't ever see new. Well, then also what we know about information is that information, all new information comes from minds. It's all we see. Humans make it. We've never seen a non-mind make information, therefore DNA. So, let me explain. There's at least two screaming evidences and reasons for the existence of God when you look at DNA. Here is the first one. The fact that there is even information at all, and all the information in the world, again, it comes from a mind. Let me introduce to you God. God is the one who has made the information. Second, when you take all that information, all that DNA, and the fact that it's been put together so complex, so long, to actually function and create human beings and turtles and whatever else, how it all came together, did it just come together by chance according to the evolutionary worldview? That's what the evolutionary worldview says. But let me say this. How many of us would say, I believe a book, the pieces of a book can fall out of the sky, maybe during a tornado, and come together and form a book with words, letters, punctuations, glue, paper, by chance? Anybody want to fight for that one? And yet the book, any book that you and I would have on our shelf, doesn't compare to the complexity and the length of the book of DNA. You see, there has to be a God who not just started information, but also has put it together for every living organism. That's intelligent design. That's just one, and I'm not even being exhaustive with DNA. And so are you convinced there's a God? When you look at things like this, I hope you are. But if you're not, that's okay. I'm going to give you more evidence today. All right? So here's another one, another wall. This is in the philosophical side of things. It's what we call the Kalam cosmological argument. You've heard of this one before. You want to come here and get it? I'm just kidding. I won't do that to you. But the Kalam cosmological argument. Say that 5 times fast. That'd be interesting. But here is what it is. It's actually not as deep as you might think it is. It's three main points of it, and here it is. Whatever begins to exist has a cause that caused it to start, right? The universe, well, we know from science it has a beginning somewhere back when. Therefore, the universe has a first cause. Something caused the universe. Now, where does God fit into this? Well, here we go. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, which then implies this. There must be an infinite thing, first cause, that exists that never had a beginning in itself, that has always been. God has always been and never had a beginning. Therefore, here he is. Then you've got the universe began to exist. Well, was God around when the universe began? Yes, because he's always been around. And therefore, the simple conclusion is God must be the first cause of the universe. God is the answer for that. You see, it's not really that deep. And yet, let me just play, if you will, for just a minute, of the atheistic evolutionary worldview. How did everything start? Help me out. The what? The Big Bang. Okay, you've heard of that. Now, do not debate with me on what the first things were out of Big Bang. Okay, I'm not a scientist and all that. But let me just play with me, because eventually these things came. So let's say that the first thing was quarks. Maybe you've heard of quarks before. And then those would eventually become electrons, and then electrons eventually became atoms. And then atoms, would eventually get to be molecules. And we're going to skip a little bit. Then you're going to eventually get fish come out of all of that. And then you're going to skip more, and then we're going to get philosophers. Fish become philosophers, okay? So that is the summary of the evolutionary worldview. But even in that worldview, they have no answer for the cosmological first cause argument, because there still has to be a finger. There still has to be something that started all that stuff to begin with, you see? And so, are you convinced that there's a God as we look at these evidences? I hope that you are. But if you're not, that's okay, because guess what? I've got another evidence I'm going to throw out at you. And so, here's another one, and that is the forensic science of the resurrection of a guy named Jesus Christ. Now, you might say, well, wait, I thought we were just talking about God in general. Now, why are we talking about Jesus? Well, one, you're in the church. What do you expect? But secondly, would you agree with me on this? That if this guy named Jesus rose from the dead, then therefore there must be a God. Okay? And so let's look at this. Forensic science, what is that? This is a legit field of science, usually found in criminology. A lot of us have watched shows like CSI, so forth. That's the whole concept. It's when you look at evidence now, trying to determine what happened in the past. Okay? And so, in fact, there's a lot of forensic scientists who have looked at the evidence of this so-called resurrection of a guy named Jesus 2,000 years ago, and they have actually become Christians because the evidence is so overwhelming. So I'm going to give you 500 evidences. Okay, maybe not 500, how about 5, okay? Just to scrape the surface from a forensic science standpoint. Did this guy Jesus raise from the dead? You guys ready? So, again, you're not going to have time to write it all down. Rewatch it later, but here we go. The first one is this. Women are recorded as the first eyewitnesses of the risen Jesus in the empty tomb. You say, what's the big deal about that? Well, in that culture, it was a chauvinistic culture, bad, but they demeaned and devalued women. If it was a lie that Jesus rose from the dead, why in the world would you make up that women were your first eyewitnesses? You are discrediting your lie right out of gates. Unless, what? That's exactly how it happened, because it happened. You see? Here's a second evidence of the resurrection of Jesus. Multiple eyewitnesses of risen Jesus. It's not just one woman was saying it. Lots of people, individual, independent eyewitnesses said so. In 1 Corinthians, it says that Peter saw him. And another time, 11 disciples all saw him together. Another time, James, Jesus' brother, saw him. Another time, there was over 500 people saw him at the same time. There's a lot of eyewitnesses that say they saw Jesus. Now, some critics would say, oh, you know what? All these people were hallucinating. They wanted so bad that Jesus be alive, that they were all hallucinating. But let me just share with you one argument that destroys that possibility. If I were to pump in LSD into a room of 500 people through the air vents, would people be hallucinating, yes or no? Yes, they would be hallucinating lots of dancing bears, unicorns, or who knows what. They would be hallucinating it, okay? But would they be hallucinating the same person? No. It's unreasonable, it's illogical. Unless you see all 500 people saw one person. You see? Screaming evidence that it happened. What else do we have? We have that Jesus' own brother James claimed that his brother Jesus was God and that he rose from the dead. How many of us here have a brother or sister and are we like toying with the thought, like, I think my brother or sister was God? You know, and then they die, and I'm going to start going out and telling people they rose from the dead too. I mean, it's crazy when you think about that. But this guy actually did, this brother did, and then on top of that, he died for that claim. If anybody would have known Jesus truly wasn't God and didn't raise from the dead, it would have been his own brother, and yet he died, which would make a lot of sense, and that's exactly what happened. Well, also not just James, Jesus' brother, but also we have the other 11 disciples all claimed that he rose and they died for that claim. If they knew it was a lie, why would you die for a lie? And just the fifth one, again, there's 500 others, but I love this one. It's kind of a problem for those that are critics of it. We still don't have a body, which would make a lot of sense if there's no body, right? So we know where Buddha sits in China, and we know where Muhammad lies in Saudi Arabia. We know these grave sites and those bodies, but I'll tell you what, for 2,000 years running now, we don't have a body, which makes a lot of sense if Jesus is not lying in the tomb, but he was resurrected. Are you convinced that there was a God? Because when you look at Jesus, he truly rose from the dead, therefore there must be a God. I hope that you are. Now, I could go on and I could give a lot more evidence, like things like Jesus did miracles and all sorts of stuff, guys. But you know what? We're actually going to stop now. Because I want us to think even deeper. Up to this point, an atheist and an agnostic is saying to you and I as a Christian, they're saying, I want you to give me evidence and reasons so I can analyze them. But what they need to do in order to reason is they need certain preconditions to even analyze evidence. Okay? So let me explain. On our structure here, it's like the foundation. We can't do any of this up here and look at this stuff if we don't have preconditions to even be able to reason and use our brains. Can I remind you once again, I said we need to love the Lord with all of our heart, mind, soul, and our mind, right? So this is where we're going to get deeper, so please don't mentally check out with me, okay? But here we go. Preconditions of reasons. We need these things in order to even analyze evidence if there's a God or not. So let me explain preconditions. It's a simple concept. It's the fact that you need some things in order to have another thing. It's very simple. You have to have these things in order to have that thing. So let's say, for example, that we want to build a snowman here in Jacksonville. Okay, we put a good old Jack's tire on there. Now, how many snowmen are we going to have in yards around here anytime soon? None. Why? Because the preconditions are not there. All right, so let me just give you some of the preconditions to have a snowman, anywhere, right? First of all, you got to have the air's got to be 32 degrees or colder, or you're not going to have a snowman. Then you have to have the atmospheric lift bring moisture above the cold air so that gravity drops it, and now it becomes snow as it comes back down. If you don't have the atmospheric lift and moisture, you're not going to have snowman. Third, you got to have the ground. It's got to be cold enough so that when the snow actually falls, it doesn't melt right away and actually stays. And fourth, you got to have enough snow come down in a certain amount of time so it actually accumulates so you can actually do stuff with it to make a snowman. And get this, it actually can't be too cold. Because if it's too cold, the snow will come, it'll fall, it'll all be fluffy and unpackable. It's got to be warm enough air, though, so it becomes packable. Now, for my Floridian friends here, I grew up all my life in the north other than the last 2 years of being here. And I'm just telling you, there's a difference between packable snow and non-packable snow, okay? So it's got to be warm enough. And then on top of that, you've got to have a human being with a brain smart enough to know what to do with it all. And I have a snowman. You understand about preconditions? Okay? And I'm not even giving all of them, okay? So, with all of that said, for us to take evidence, for an atheist and agnostic to take evidence that we give them, they have to reason, and therefore they have to have preconditions even to be able to reason and look at those evidences. And so, let me give to you what some of those are, okay? Make sure I'm there. Okay, yeah. So here we go. I made up this LUM, L-U-M. It's an acronym. And it's going to have three of the preconditions. This is not exhaustive again. There's more. But LUM, just to help us to remember them, and it doesn't mean anything other than when I did Google it, I guess if you live in Scotland, your chimney is a LUM. I learned that. So there you go. That was free. Don't charge you for that one. Okay, so here we go. LUM. L is laws of logic. When atheists or agnostics is asking for evidence, they're using the laws of logic in order to be able to analyze the evidence. Now, there's at least three laws of logic. I'm not going to cover all of them. I'm just going to go for one of them. Here's the law of non-contradiction. Maybe you've heard of this one. The law of non-contradiction. What does that mean? That means that something can't be is and not be at the same time. It can't be true and false at the same time. You can't have contradictions. So if I said to you, hey, did you guys enjoy that dry rain we had the other day? You're like, yeah, see, I'll have to face it. What? Like, exactly. You just used the law of non-contradiction. You see, we use this all the time. Okay? Or another way to do it, like, I say, hey, Jonathan and Allison, Holly and I would love to have you guys come over to our house tonight. We'll clean it, we'll get it ready, we'd love to have you come. And you know what? We don't have a house yet, but we really hope to have a house someday. We've been saving up to have a house so we can have people like you over. So are you guys going to come over to our house tonight so if you don't go offend us? And you'd be like, we need to get some help with this guy. I work with this guy, right? Why? Because I'm violating the law of non-contradiction. It's unreasonable, you see? So we are using the law of non-contradiction all the time. You have to look at evidence. Now here's some other facts about the laws of logic. They are universal. They apply everywhere. They're never changing. They're not going to change tomorrow. And they're immaterial. Okay? They're immaterial. And so let's test that with the law of non-contradiction. Okay? Jonathan, love you, man. This is why you get space big bucks. You get picked on the sermons. Okay, so Jonathan. So, let's test this with the law of non-contradiction. Is it safe to say that the law of non-contradiction applies here in Jacksonville among all of us? Yes or no? Yes, good answer. I'd like to look at Allison. Like, Allison, you got the brain. So, yes. And is it safe to say the law of non-contradiction also should apply in Norway? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so it's universal, right? No matter where you go in the universe, the law of non-contradiction should apply. All right, so there's the first one. How about law of non-contradiction? Is it safe to say that we're going to be living by it? We should be living by it tomorrow just like we are today, yes or no? Yes. Okay, so it's never changing. And how about this? Have you ever tasted a law of non-contradiction, tripped over it, touched it, anything? Nothing you know. You haven't. Why? Because it's immaterial, right? And yet, does it exist? Law of non-contradiction exists. Laws of logic exist. They're immaterial. Okay? So, get this. Hang with me. Now, here we go. Sorry. When an atheist or an agnostic says to a Christian, I want you to give me evidence for God, they are using the precondition of laws of logic. They are saying that God cannot both exist and not exist at the same time. Right? So see how they're using the law of non-contradiction right there. And they're saying, whatever evidence you give me, better not contradict other evidence. You see? So everybody, Christians, atheists, agnostics, we are all using the laws of logic as we look at things in life and to be able to reason. Now, let's go to the U. What's the U in our foundation? It's the uniformity of nature. Uniformity of nature. This is the idea that as we look at nature, we can assume things will continue to happen as they continue to happen. It's put it this way. We have every reason to think that something's going to be the same tomorrow as it is today. The universe is uniform and it continues on. Does that make sense? Okay? And so we have good reason to think these things. Now, we use the uniformity of nature all the time as human beings. Everybody. Let me give an example by asking this question. Every one of us, when we woke up this morning and that lovely alarm went off, did by chance anybody, before you took the covers off, did you grab your bedpost really tight and hold on for dear life and slowly take the covers off because you're afraid you might fly up to the ceiling by chance? Why? Because maybe gravity just chose not to be uniform overnight. Do you see? Did anybody walking in here and over to the north, did you go and check your chair and make sure it was going to hold your mask this time, like last time? You see, we practice assumption of uniformity of nature every day, all the time. Atheists, agnostics, Christians, doesn't matter. And now here's the thing. And so, when an atheist says, I want you to give me proof of reasons in the existence of God, they are saying whatever evidence you give me again should be true not just today, but the evidence should be true tomorrow. They're assuming the uniformity of nature of evidence, and this is even deeper, they're even saying that there can be evidence that is never changing and true tomorrow as it is today. Which, hang with me on that, and you'll understand why I said it's even a big deal that they think that there can be evidence that doesn't change. Okay? And now here's the end of our preconditions. Let's continue to love God with our minds and pay attention, take notes, and do your best to get this. This one's the easiest to understand. Okay? It's this idea that there's a moral standard that everybody can be held to. It's this idea that there also the morality is universal, it's never changing, and it's immaterial as well. Now, when an atheist or an agnostic, when they say to a Christian, you're not allowed to just say God exists and just that's all there is. You have to, you ought to give me reasons and evidence for the existence of God. Do you realize that in those statements I just said, they are making moral statements? Did you hear it? You can't do something, you have to do something. There's no oughts without morality. The atheists and agnostics are actually making a moral statement saying you need to give evidence for things that you believe. That's actually a moral statement among many other things. And so we are all using the preconditions of reason as we live life and as we look at evidence and so forth. Now you might say, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Now here's where the sermon's going to take a turn. Up to this point, who has been the one on trial, if you will? God. Because God exists. There's all the evidence. It's analyzed it. God's been on trial. But now we are going to turn the table in love and respectfully. And we are now going to put atheism, that worldview, on trial. Is atheism, according to its own worldview, is it allowed to look at evidence, demand evidence, look at it, analyze it? Does atheism, by its own worldview, even have preconditions of reason, justification for these things at all to begin with? Well, let's walk through that, okay? But before we do, let me remind us what atheism is. Okay, it's not just belief there is no God, but let me spell it out even deeper. Okay, you're not going to be able to write all this down, but just hang with me and write it later so you can rewatch it. But there's only time, matter, and space that exist, and it's randomly bouncing into itself. Okay? Atheism believes there's no God, therefore. No spiritual realm. There's no immaterial things. There's only the physical, and it can be seen, even if you have to use a microscope, but it's material. It can be seen. Atheism believes that there is no purpose for anyone or anything in this world. There's no purpose or meaning. For somehow, something came from nothing to become everything. That's a good summary of atheism right there, okay? And then 5, there's no supreme, personal, intelligent power that's actually holding the universe together. To summarize atheism, it believes that it just is and it's always changing. Okay? So this is a summary of atheism. So in that worldview, that I just further explained, though, does atheism have a right, a justification to analyze evidence? Do they have a right and a justification for the preconditions to reason to even look at evidence? And so let's put atheism on trial. Let's go back through the laws of logic. Let's remind ourselves again, what's laws of logic? Universal, never changing, and immaterial. But atheism, according to its worldview, does not believe there's any power that's holding a law of logic together here as it is anywhere else. They hope it does, but there's no justification, no power holding laws of logic to be universal. Atheism does not believe there's a power that's also keeping the laws of logic working tomorrow like they are today. They just hope that it's going to continue to work, but there's no basis to think it will. In fact, get this. Is not the evolutionary atheistic worldview, the premise of all of it is that everything is changing. Everything is evolving. And yet the laws of logic are never changing, but they don't have any justification for that. They just hope it is. And then finally, atheism does not believe in anything that's immaterial, yet they'll continue to use the laws of logic. And as they ask a Christian for laws of logic for evidence and use the laws of logic, they don't have justification for that themselves. And so in a way, they have given up. If they are true atheists, they are not allowed to use the laws of logic, and yet they do when they ask for evidence from Christians for a God. How about the uniformity of nature? What's the uniformity of nature one more time? It's that we have every reason to think something's going to be the same tomorrow as it is today. The universe is uniform. But once again, according to the atheistic worldview, there is no power that's actually holding things to be the same as it is tomorrow. There is no power throughout the universe to hold and make sure that gravity continues to work as it is. They hope that it continues to work, but they have no assurance that it's truly going to work. And so actually, this is what I want you to understand. Even if you're an agnostic and you're thinking atheism might be true, if you're going to be a true atheist, every morning you better hope that gravity is working. You might want to start holding on to the bedpost as you slowly take the covers off. Because in that worldview, in an atheistic worldview, gravity could just stop working like that. And you have no justification to think it will, other than it just did last time. You see what I'm saying? And yet, when an atheist in that worldview asks for a Christian to give evidence, they're assuming that there's evidence that what is uniform, is going to be the same. You can't have evidence that it's going to change. And yet in their own worldview, they have no justification for the uniformity of nature. They just hope it will. Well, let's go to the third one, morality. Does an atheist have justification for morality? This idea that there's oughts that everybody should go by. They don't. An atheist believes that things just are. There is no morality. There's no absolute God that gives a moral standard that everybody should be called to. Instead, you know what morality is for an atheist worldview? Is that every one of our brains are just fizzing with the chemicals. And so let's say that Sydney here, she's fizzing that murder is not right. And Jonathan over here is saying no, murder is right. There's no superseding morality saying which one of them is fizzing the right thing. And really, then it's whoever's the stronger fizzing gets to win over the other and push their moral fizzing onto somebody else's moral fizzing. But there's no ultimate moral fizzing that we all go by. You understand? And yet, an atheist says, you as Christians can't just say there's God. You have to give evidence. And they're claiming these moral statements. And in their own worldview, they have no justification to make such ought claims. Do you see what I'm doing here? And so let me just say this in love. Let me summarize what the atheistic worldview looks like. When an atheist or an agnostic says that you have to give me evidence to prove God or not, here's what's going on. It's like someone trying to argue against the existence of air. Think about that for just a minute. Air doesn't exist. Reason 1. Reason 2. What am I doing? Not only does air have to exist for the critic to exist, to argue against the existence of air, but every argument they use, they're using air to argue against the existence of air. The atheistic worldview has no justification for the preconditions for reason to argue against the evidence and the so forth of God among themselves, and yet they borrow from the Christian worldview to argue against the Christian worldview. That's what's going on in the worldview. And so, to kind of summarize it, if you would allow me to lovingly, respectfully quote for you what God Himself says about atheism. And here's the verse. Psalm 14:1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Now you might say, whoa, wow, that's like a strong word, fool. It is a strong word in our culture, right? The way that it's not the way that we as Americans in the 21st century look at fool. Let me explain what the word fool in the Bible means. It means unreasonable. It means irrational. It means that you're not thinking clearly. atheism is irrational, not just simply because it just is and he says it is. It's because it truly is irrational. It's a worldview that doesn't make sense. That's what God is saying about it. And you might be saying, no, wait a second, wow, you really took atheism in this worldview and you really approached it hard. Maybe I haven't heard it that way before, but maybe ask why. Can I tell you why I just did this way? It's because actually God says to his people, this is how we are to lovingly deal with atheism. Let me share with you a verse, like I said, 7 years ago. This verse changed my life. Are you ready? Proverbs chapter 26, verse 5. God says, answer a fool, in our case, someone who believes in atheism or agnosticism, thinking that atheism is a possibility. But how? As his folly, as that atheism truly deserves to be answered. You want to think in atheistic worldview? Let me show you in love what your worldview allows you to do and not do. Do you see? Now, why do we do that? So we can bolster ourselves and make ourselves feel good and win an argument and tear someone down? No, brothers and sisters, no, not at all. The reason is that they not be wise in their own eyes. You see, God knows this. No one's going to change their worldview if they don't have doubts about their worldview. And so God is saying the way you love people, children of mine, is you lovingly take them in their own worldview and show them the holes that already exist there that they probably don't know about, and you help them to start doubting so that they might open their mind to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is what the Lord is calling us to do, is to learn the things that we just went through. So one of my prayers and my goals, as I said, brothers and sisters, is as you've heard me go through all of this content, drinking from a fire hydrant, is not that there's going to be a test when you walk out, did you get everything I said? Because like I said, if you got everything I said, then you are amazing. And this is years of study that I'm throwing out here in a very short amount of time. But what I'm trying to do here is to show you, though, that one, there is an extreme amount of answers and reasons, not just for existence of God, but also to show you that atheism is not all that it's cracked out to be. So that we can learn what I've talked about. Why? Because of our atheistic and our agnostic friends and family members that we love. That if they die right now, they are going to hell forever because they believe atheism or agnosticism, thinking atheism is actually possible, but they don't know Jesus. See, we need to learn the stuff that I'm talking about today. We need to commit ourselves to learning these things so that when we go and talk to them, we don't just say, well, just believe. Just believe. Now, for some people, you share the gospel with them and say, do you believe? That's all they need. They'll believe. But that's not everybody. Guys, there are too many Christians in our world today that are leaving Christianity for atheism and agnosticism. And you know why? Because too often, and they literally wrote this as they made their statement of apostasy to leave Christianity, they have literally said, I had all these questions about these things, and every time I went to a pastor, and every time I went to a Christian, they just said, just believe more, just have more faith. That's all they got. And they abandoned Christianity. And I guarantee they have never heard the stuff that I'm sharing with you today. So I plead with you, my brothers and sisters, let's love God with our minds, and let's learn these things. We have not just the scriptures, which are sufficient in and of themselves, but God is a God of truth that exists everywhere, and let's learn all of this stuff, because there's screaming evidence of his existence, of the triune God, and there's screaming evidence that the option that people are looking at, agnosticism, atheism, is not a good option. And I believe with all my heart, the more Christians that we learn these things, the less we're going to see people leaving Christianity for them. And so rewatch this sermon over and over. And you don't have to be me. Find someone else better than me. Okay, I don't care. But learn this stuff. We also have a class that's going on in our church, which is it's actually literally going on right now. And it's called Defending the Faith in an Age of Reason. And literally taking everything I'm talking about and going through it. Longer, slower, much slower pace, right? I highly encourage you to go to that. Now, with social distancing, unfortunately, it may already be full. In fact, my email has exploded since last service, people asking about it. So, but try to register online. But the good news is, if you don't physically get in, you can live stream in. And so I just encourage you to do that. Some other people were asking me for books. Email me. I will send you so many books and so much stuff you can listen to. And just, but I'm asking of us, brothers and sisters, let's learn this stuff and just stop saying, just pray more and just have more faith. Are those things important? Should we do those things? Yes. But there's more that we can give people to help them. Well, what else did I talk about? My prayer, my goal was that as you heard all this, brothers and sisters, your faith in Christ would explode with confidence like maybe never before. Maybe it already has begun. That's my hope and my prayer. Because when I heard this stuff, I was like, this is amazing. I thought atheism was like a possibility. It's not even close. And then, but Christianity, what about that? And so I want to give you one more thing to run with today. And that's this. Because right now, atheists might be saying, now, you know what? I'll admit, you give me some hard things to think about from my worldview. But, Pastor, does Christianity have any justification for these preconditions of reason? Or are you in the same boat with atheism? Well, I'm so glad that you asked, because I'm about to answer that. Let's go back through the laws of logic. Again, they are universal, never changing, and immaterial. As a Christian, we believe in a God who is omnipresent, universal. We believe in a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and can keep things never changing. We believe in a God who is immaterial in his very essence, therefore can make immaterial things like laws of logic. He's also omnipotent, which means he's all-powerful, which means he can make laws of logic and make them truly universal, never changing, and immaterial. We have every justification as Christians for the laws of logic to look at evidence. Wow, right? So we have justification. How about this, Christians? Do we have justification for the uniformity of nature, that things will be the same tomorrow as them today? Not that we just hope they will be, but there's something that will make gravity keep working. We believe in a God who is omnipotent, all-powerful, everywhere, made the laws of nature, and is sustaining them by his very word every day. So Christians, here's a gift for us. We don't have to grab the bedpost every morning we wake up. We have every reason to trust that God is going to keep the universe in the uniformity that it is. How about morality? This one's kind of easy, isn't it? As Christians, do we have any justification to say that there's oughts and not oughts and should and standards? Of course we do. We believe in a God that is the ultimate moral standard that we should all be living up to and looking to. Do you see, as a Christian, the Christian God is the justification for all the preconditions to be able to reason, to even look at evidence. Let me summarize what God himself says about it in Colossians chapter 2. In Christ Jesus himself, in whom are hidden what? All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Listen, it's not just, if you have spiritual stuff, go to Jesus. It is, you can't do science without Jesus. You can't reason without a Jesus. Things in this world do not make sense without the triune God. He is all, as it runs away. Jesus, the triune God, he is the premise, the basis for any field that you might work in your life. It would only exist if God existed. Wow. And so, with all of that, there's even still one more awesome thing in addition to that. This amazing God that makes reason even possible. It's not some God, according to the deists, where he's just out there and he doesn't care about us. He loves us intimately and personally. And that God who made all things, sees us, and made us, and knows we have an immaterial thing called a soul that has a problem called sin, and yet he knew that if it doesn't get fixed and we die, we of this little physical world here somewhere, and he knows that it's going to be a place called hell, but he loved you and me so much that 2,000 years ago, he went from the immaterial into becoming the material person of Jesus Christ and died on the cross and rose from the dead so that you and I can actually be forgiven and to live with him forever. That's what we call the good news of Jesus Christ. So do you know Jesus? Not just intellectually. This is where it's got to go beyond mind. Do you know him in every part in an intimate, personal way because you have believed in Jesus? Repented of your sins. If you do that, the immaterial, universal, omnipotent God, holding the universe together, will come to your soul and change you from the inside out. Make sure you know that. Brothers and sisters, as we close out, again, I hope and I pray that you have seen that atheism is not all that it's cracked out to be in our universities and in our science classes and all of that. It is not. And then I hope that you have seen a confidence in Christianity like you've never done before. And in that, then, let's go now in a holy confidence to our atheistic and our agnostic friends. Not sheepish, wondering if we're in the truth. No, like, this is the truth. And I'm going to lovingly share it with you. Let's do that for the glory of God. Let's stand and sing.